tequila, you've heard of mezcal, but this guy is truly the king. Meet Andrew, and you would not believe the state he's from. This is super cool, and they don't have cactuses there.
Correct. That's right.
Let's go,
So yeah,
Andrew. Let's hear it.
I'm kick off intro. Yeah, so my name is Andrew Bernauer. I am the founder of El Viaje Spirits. So El Viaje right now is Raicilla brand. So Raicilla is an agave spirit that comes from the southern part of Jalisco. So if you think about tequilas from the northern region, in the southern region, they've always made this spirit for hundreds of years. It's part of the history there. It's in the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountain Range, but it's never been legalized until 2019 is when they got their denomination of origin. So that's why it's pretty unknown. And then the flavor profile is very unique as well. So it's almost like a gin. It's very floral and botanical, a lot of citrus notes due to it being a different agave species, the wild fermentation process. We also cook the agaves above ground in these adobe mud brick ovens, whereas with mezcal, that's cooked underground. That's why a lot of mezcals have the smoky notes that people notice. So really, that's kind of where I fell in love with Raicilla, right? It's a unique agave spirit. There were so many tequila brands popping up. I came from the alcohol industry myself, working with bourbon brands. Bourbon and whiskey is mainly the distilleries I was working with. And so when I got into agave, I already saw tequila was getting saturated. And that's kind of when I started just studying all the different spirits and found Raicilla. And here we are.
Andrew, can you spill the beans on? Are all those tequilas really different, or is there like a gnome over there that you'll find they're all from the same place?
Well, in the
I don't
tequila
want to. I
space,
don't want to dig too far. You know, you're never supposed to talk about negative about your competitors, but let's get the truth here.
yeah, well, and that's a controversial topic too. But yeah, certain gnomes, I mean, make a lot of brands, right? And people don't realize that. They just might like this certain brand, but there might be 20, 30 other ones that come from that same gnome and might have slightly different, production procedures or the yeast they're using or so on and so forth. It could change, but yeah, the tequila space, and consumers are getting a lot smarter now too, right? Like the big thing in tequila is people want additive free. They don't want, because with tequila in its denomination of origin, you can add up to 1% volume of flavorings, colorings, like glycerin, which is like an oil to make it go down smooth. There's all these kind of ways it can be modified to a degree, and consumers are rebelling against that, if you will. And sometimes it leads to hangovers and just a more commercialized product.
And as we know, there's many ways to count to one. So
Yeah,
the one
yeah, that's
percent.
right. Yeah, that's a guideline. I mean, how things play out, it depends, I guess. But yeah, there are a lot of players in the tequila space for sure. And there's amazing tequilas out there. I mean, I know some of the producers and some of the brands, and they're incredible. And they've kind of mastered that craft. It's just, there's a lot of other agave spirits that are great too, like Bacanora,
Ooh,
Sotol,
no one knows about
Raicilla, which
that.
is where I am. Yeah, and it's just, they're more unknown to people. So now the goal is educating people, introducing them to, okay, you like tequila. Well, there's a lot of other agave spirits that you could be enjoying that people just don't know about yet.
You know, I had one of these experiences myself. I was reading up about different mezcals, and I said I want to get the real, the one that's in the ground. The guy's going without clothing. Tell me if I'm wrong. The mix is like, oh my goodness, this is like raw. And I ordered it from Mexico itself,
Okay.
and it made it over the border, but it's a different product, and that's why it's cool to have you on. When you have a real craftsman creating it, it's different than the one that you see on all the billboards. It had a very different taste.
That's right. And mezcal, if you think about it, kind of like we do with bourbon, right? And if you got a bourbon and whiskey background. So technically all bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbon, right? Well, mezcal can be produced in 8 different states throughout Mexico, its denomination of origin. So, long story short, mezcal can come from a lot of different regions with all different production methods, how they cook the agaves, how they distill it, the agave species. Some of that's more universal, like espadín, but I mean, that varies, but it's so vast. Like a mezcal is really just a name for an agave spirit. So you can have mezcals that taste completely different from all over Mexico, and it's
Oh,
very
fascinating.
diverse for sure.
Wow, wow. Okay, so Philson, how do you get your pineapples over the border, truckloads? Let's go through the process, hands on. We want to get the train loads coming down to your facility.
That's the goal. That's the
Yeah.
goal. So as
It's
far as
cool. It's different. It's unique. It's awesome.
it
And it's
is different.
Alabama.
Well, that's where I'm based out of, right? I mean, technically, the world is home in essence, traveling around with this. But yeah, I mean, so my producer is in a town called Muskota. That's where he's based out of. It's kind of like the main hub in the southern region where Ricea is produced, in Jalisco. And there's two types of Riceas. There's mountain and coastal Riceas. Mine is what you would call a mountain Ricea. The agaves grow in that region in the mountains. The coastals are from Acaba Corrientes region. It's more near the coast, Puerto Vallarta, if you're familiar with that. So different flavor profile, different agave species used for it. But those are the two types. Benito Salcedo Rios, that's my Ricelero. So he produces it, does all the labeling, bottling, everything, and then that is where it comes from and ships across the border throughout various warehousing hubs here and gets into the market in the U.S.
Whoa, so you're actually in Mexico producing.
Correct. So to be a
Oh,
Ricea, to have Ricea on the
explain that.
label, it has to be made there. So it has to
Mexico.
be certain agave species, has to be made there. It even has to be bottled and labeled there too. So it's not like you can just ship in a bulk spirit and bring it in the U.S. and then call it a mezcal or a tequila. It has to be all, the whole process has to be done there.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, and I was going to ask you all the Spanish names that you like. You want to bring up to the counter and say, "Hey, I want one of these." Got to be labeled in Mexico. I was like, "How agave spirits can be made in the U.S.?" But now I understand. Oh wow.
Yeah. So like there's some brands that like distilleries here in the States, they might want to make their own tequila, but they have to call it just agave spirit. If you notice, you'll see that on their label. So they could not legally call it a tequila if they're not producing it in Mexico in that region of the city of Tequila.
In Guadalajara, if I
In
pronounced
Guadalajara.
it
Yep.
right.
Yep.
This
Exactly.
is so interesting. So people don't know, and maybe you could explain. Like, there's like 100 different types of agaves, or what are they called? Then when they go out of the ground, walk people through the process, the difference between the wild ones, and then the ones that are farmed. Like, what's going
Sure.
on?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a ton of agave species. Won't go through listing them all. With Ricea, we technically have five species that can be used to make Ricea itself. When we talk about wild agaves versus farmed, it kind of varies to a degree, but in essence, wild agaves are you're just going out on public land in essence and sourcing those agaves. They're just growing in the wild and people are harvesting them and then using them to make a spirit. Whereas like for my Ricea, my Ricelero has an abundance of land. He has all these agaves planted. He has them 8 to 10 years of age and maturation that have the sugars we need. He's constantly planting new ones for everything we pull. So he has a true operation. However, it's still focused on sustainability. You know, it's not commercialized, it's rainwater irrigation, all those things. But he has the infrastructure, and really that's a positive thing. So
Mhm.
wild source agaves might sound cool to certain people, but you're affecting the local ecosystem when you do that. So
Correct.
the bats, the pollinators, the bugs, the all these other things, you're affecting all that if you start wiping all those agaves out. So it's kind of, with a small scale that can be done, but if you're trying to scale large volumes of a spirit, wild sourcing the agaves, it's just not sustainable and it's not a good practice in essence because you're damaging the local ecosystem by doing that.
I completely agree with that. It reminds me of that pigeon that went extinct in the bisons. You think that, oh, the wild, it's beautiful and it's nice, but when there's a demand, and it was all good. I read through the history of tequilas and agaves, and it's all good when it's for local production. So you got the little village, 10 people, 15 people that go out. It's beautiful. I love reading about it because I guess you'll share all that history, and it really brings you into a certain taste, or certain vibe that you go by the tequila, and then you're like, I want the real McCoy, stealing from Scotch that term. But what you don't realize is that only works when you have 20 people in a village that drink once a year. When you have 8 billion people in the village, which is really what we are at today, the global village, if you buy that bottle, and you're not going to spend the equivalent of, if it's a global village, it should be $2 million for that bottle, just to, the demand used to be 20 people in the village once a year. We got to get back to once a year. You're destroying the whole local ecosystem, and you got to support the local farmers. They're doing a tremendous service. Not to mention that the sugars, it's easier to work with. It's healthier. Just
Exactly. And there's a balance in it, right? Like for me and Benito, my Ricelero, like he's trying to grow his operation. He wants to scale. He wants to be able to employ more people, all those things. He's trying to create an industry in the Ricea space, which is great. And that's why I'm here to support that. I mean, he's the true artist that's crafting it and making it. I'm kind of the conduit that's creating it and getting it in the marketplace. But he has the infrastructure to do it. That's good. What we don't want to do is, yeah, damage things locally or wreck a bunch of wild agaves and wreck land and all those things. That's not a responsible way to do it. So, but we don't want to just also, for me personally, as I grow El Viaje, and I'll have other spirits in the portfolio probably at some point too, but it's important to me to work with artisan producers. So like, I don't want to work with, just a complete commercialized, like using autoclaves and all these commercialized methods like you'll see in tequila. I don't want that. I still want the rustic methods, but we want to be able to scale it in a responsible way too. So
Super cool. So, share your experience with bringing alcohol over the border. I'm sure you had a lot of legal headache.
well, I think with any alcohol brand, when people start
Mhm.
it and launch it, they don't realize there's a ton of compliance work, right?
Yeah,
So, if you just say,
I
hey,
do
I want to,
that.
yeah, yeah, if
I
they're like,
love
oh, I want to
it.
launch a brand, it's like, well, you're at least a year, maybe even 2 years just in compliance work to get your federal TTB and all these other things and so forth. The importing process, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but there's fees you've got to account for. Your inventory may get held up at the border. That's rolling the dice. You don't know all this tariff talk. Technically, it's not affecting agave products, at least artisan products, due to the NAFTA agreement, but that's still, there's a lot of unknowns, right? It's a lot of variability and unknowns right now. But yeah, that's the main process is just you're coming across, you're paying those brokerage fees for the customs brokers and your freight, everything else, and just hoping it goes smoothly. And you've got to kind of forecast your inventory because you can run out easily too. And then now you're left leaving your distributors hanging, and it's all a fine art, if you will, to that process. So
Tell me about it. You fight for the shelf space, and then you can't fill it. Is the biggest nightmare.
that's right. I mean, and if you got money to have just 100 pallets sitting around, good for you. But most brands that are starting up, that's not a reality. So it's how much inventory do you need to have versus what do you do when you're running out? And because it takes time. Luckily with Ricea, we're only a Blanco. So that's the way they've always traditionally made this spirit. They want the true flavor of the agave. And that's how a lot of tequila competitions are tasted too. They don't do barrel aged products. So at least I don't have the aging process other than just it settles in glass for about 30 days just to get the flavors kind of concentrated in uniform. So that's not a tremendously long process, but still when you think about freight, going through customs, getting across the border, like it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it takes time, certainly.
I guess you're lucky enough that you're not dealing with wine, because that could get stuck at the border, and we all know what happens with wine when it's stuck in a crate at the border.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, even with spirits, I mean, they can open it up, and you'll find bottles have been opened, or cases have been opened, and things inspected, and you don't really know how it's going to play out each time. You just hope it goes smoothly.
You
Long story
know,
short.
at least it's not wine that spoils. I had a individual, he shipped spirit on a freight, so obviously not USPS. And he tells me he started a tradition. He always throws in an extra bottle. If they order 900, he sends in 901. I said, why? It costs me money. He says, no, one for the driver. I said,
Yeah,
really? He says it's too often. He says the aggravation when the client receives, if the client receives 901, they're grateful for the extra bottle. He always says, look, it's a backup. If one breaks when you're pack gifting, no problem. He says, but if it arrives 899 and they order 900, he just says the aggravation costs it causes your client. It's like it's just not worth it. I throw him up for the driver.
that's right. And you've got spillage, and I mean, you hope things are packaged well, but it gets rough in these trucks. And I mean, think about the mileage they're driving too. Inventory can get damaged very easily. So that's just one part of the puzzle of many pieces for sure.
You ever opened up a truck and got attacked by your product? There's
What do you
packaged
mean?
well enough.
What do you mean? Oh, I mean like collapsing on me or
Just
something like that?
one
Yeah,
of
no.
I had on the show a distillery,
Okay.
an importer of barrels, and he told me like there was one company that shipped to him, and they didn't package it right. He opened up the back of the crate, and the barrels came rolling out at him. And like he's like, yeah, they're heavy, 600 pounds.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that truly is a work hazard. No, I haven't had that. I mean, but you can. sometimes it looks very clean and uniform, and sometimes it looks like it's been through a battle. But you just hope everything's in good shape. So that's what you got
Oh,
to do.
super cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to hear more about like the harvesting, if you know more about what's going on in Mexico, about the actual process. Because you're a new product. I mean, it's old, but people
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
heard of this yet.
That's right. I mean, most people haven't heard of Raicilla itself. So the harvesting process, very similar to tequila, even though it's a different agave species, right? But you still got the humidors. They're cutting the agaves down and then digging up the piña. Then we're chopping that, putting it in the oven. So we're using this mud brick oven. That's what we cook the agaves with once they're harvested. We put firewood in with it. You seal it with mud on the top and the bottom, and it cooks for about 3 days. And that's what cooks the
Wow.
agaves down to have the appropriate sugars. So yeah, like when they come out of that, they taste like candy. I mean, it's incredible. It's really delicious. And so then you've got your sugars prepared. You put those agaves in the fermentation tanks, and you start the fermentation process. But the harvesting is pretty similar. It's just agave maximiliana, which is the agave species that I use. It's a little bit more challenging to handle. So, like for one, if you've ever seen like blue Weber agaves, that's what tequila has to be made from, right? The leaves, when you see them coming out of the ground, they're kind of tall and skinny. So with agave maximiliana, what we use, they're kind of wide, and then they have thorns at the edge of them as well, which are kind of almost like poisonous. So
Ooh.
it's a little, yeah, it's a little more of a challenge to handle and a little more, just the harvesting process is a little more cumbersome in that sense, just due to the agave species. But the principles of it are similar, though, for sure.
Is this also one time adventure with the fruit and then the plant is over with, like the agave? Uh,
Correct, correct. So that's why we kind of have to really try to forecast. And Benito Marasleiro does a great job of keeping track. So he's constantly has his nursery, and he's growing the new agaves, if you will, and the babies, the hijos as they call it, and then planting them for everything that he's harvesting out. So it's kind of a constant process of, okay, I'm harvesting this much to make this many liters. I've got to put this many back in the ground. And then you've got to wait 8 to 10 years as well, right? To get to
correct.
maturation. So,
So
so
for the
it's,
crowd, agave is not like corn that grows yearly. Okay, any agave spirit, it's 8 to 10 years. I believe there are some that will tell you 7, but a good one will be 8 to 10 years. There's this fruit out in a farm that grows. It grows from the ground. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. It grows from the ground, and then it has these big leaves coming out of the side. You want the center. It's called a pineapple or pinata. Uh,
yep,
you
yep.
get
They just say
that?
the pina. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
pinata's what you hit. that
That's right.
that we've gotten, or maybe it's just the adult pinata. Anyways, so these leaves that you got to chop off on the side that have, and what we're hearing now is sharp edges, that also happen to be poisonous, and so you got to be careful. Then what they do is they pick up these pineapples, they put them on the back of a truck. How much do they weigh?
I mean, it depends on the size of it. I mean, anywhere from 50 pounds, 40, 50 pounds, some can get bigger. That's why once you start putting them in the oven to cook, they've normally chopped them down into more manageable pieces. But, they can get very heavy. I mean, we've got some photos of some that, they called like giants, but they truly were like bigger than people. I mean, it's incredible how old they were, which is a different flavor profile, but 8 to 10 years is kind of the sweet spot, right? Is what you're looking for. And they still did it the old school way. They'll have the donkeys out in the field too that, can carry the agaves on each side, help load them up to haul them back to the taberna,
It
load
must be
some
a
in trucks
sight.
too. So yeah, yeah. So it's a cool process.
I mean, is this like boiling heat of the summer that's nice to see on TV, or is this actually experience to experience?
As far as the timing that they do it.
Yeah, to go ahead and see the wagons
Oh yeah,
loaded
no,
up
that's process, and that's the time they're doing it. So
in the
into
summer.
the yeah, well, into the summer becomes the rainy season. It's normally the fall is when they're actually harvesting out of the ground, but it's all relative to production, right? So in other words, if I needed to produce a significant amount now, we would have to go pull those agaves and start to get ready to cook them. But
Oh,
after about May, the distillation season starts tapering off. Then they're focusing on planting in, end of May and June, just because they're going to get ready for the rainy season, which in Jalisco comes every summer. And then after that, they'll start sprouting up, do more harvesting in the fall. So it's kind of seasonal based, but it's also just supply and demand, right? I mean, if we need product, then they'll pull some out then. But yeah, it
got it.
definitely gets
Okay,
hot. I mean, it's very, very warm out there.
that is super cool.
definitely.
that, yeah, thank you. That is super cool that you literally can just pull it out. I mean, there's no other. This is a whole different planning schedule. So you have 30 days in the glass vat. You can go
Hmm.
backwards and say, hey, let's say someone calls up and says, hey, Andrew, we're making a huge party. You do have the best bottle. People don't know that yet. You have the
Thank you,
best
brother.
bottle. We need 30,000 bottles for a party. We're 6 months out to January. You can technically just start the process today without the TTB's involvement because I'm sure they'll have a hiccup over there in compliance, but you can have that ready. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, as long as you've got your brand and your licensing, you're transacting. Yeah. I mean, for me, we can do that. We can meet that requirement. So yeah, it's just all processed. And so right now, which we've added some distillery equipment, he's kind of increased, but when we started this out, it was roughly 500 liters per batch. So when we would do one production run, you'd get 500 liters out of it, which sounds significant, but it's super tiny when you look at column
Correct.
stills and massive distilleries, how many they're doing, per run.
So you're running a pot still.
Yep, exactly, exactly. The Olympic still just kind of old school. Yep.
So you're running the most inefficient way and the most traditional way, it sounds like.
Well, the really crazy part was just because I have a distillation background, but on a large commercial scale, right? It was the clients I worked with. But for years, even after Ricea got its denomination of origin, the Riceros, when they would light the still up, right, and keep the still heated, you got to maintain a certain temp and pressure and everything in the still. They were doing that with firewood. So someone had to be attending it 24/7 for days during the distilling process. And then finally it switched to gas because it's not affecting the flavor at all. You're just heating the still. But literally think about that. Like, how do you maintain temperature on a still for days at a time with firewood? Like, it's insanely challenging. So yeah, but there's a balance of traditional methods and wanting to maintain those two versus modern efficiencies. But yeah, it really impressed me. I was like, wow, this is a whole different way of doing things, and it's a lot of work and craft that goes into it and skill.
So the oven is still done in the traditional way with wood, or you're using gas?
Exactly. So the oven's the traditional way. It's just the still itself. Once the agaves were fermented, you throw them in the still, and then you start distilling, getting your off product, etc., cutting the heads and tails, and that's your ricea you're collecting. They were literally heating that still with firewood, that's what I'm saying, to control that, the parameters of that, the right temperature and pressure and everything, because you got to watch that, right? You can't over pressurize it. But to do that with just firewood it blew my mind, and that was recently. People were still doing that, so. It's very traditional methods, which is cool for sure.
I guess if they're using firewood, they did not have a local fire marshal because
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean,
you can't get that approved in the U.S. anywhere. Even gas, I believe, is getting more difficult.
sure.
Open
Yep,
fire.
yep, yep. And it's
Okay, guys.
always been kind of a small scale thing. So
Up there's alcohol coming out at like 70, 80. We're trying to get 96. And down here we have an open fire. So if anyone mm-mm,
yep,
doesn't go.
yep. That's how it's done, how it was done. So, but it's great to see though, and I love to see those, and that's really where I fell in love with agave spirits too, right? Like I came from a world where flavor profiles were created in R&D labs. I mean, that's a lot of like the big whiskey brands
Oh yeah.
and bourbons and all that. It's all
Feel that. Let's go.
yeah,
Pull out the gloves.
yeah. So, well, I mean, it's great that they have the resources, I guess, to do that. But to me, it's kind of just like cooking too, right? Like if you can use all this technology to cook or whatever, that's fine. But then what about people that are cooking on firewood and from scratch and, restaurants like that? To me, that's a real craft and talent to do things that way. And I think that translates to spirits as well. It's like there's commercialized spirits that are almost like fast food, with tons of preservatives and all these things to just make it profitable and so on and so forth. And then there are some that are truly made in a craft kind of artisan manner. And I think the agave space as a whole is very much more craft oriented. That's kind of why I fell in love with it as well.
So fascinating because, you know, it's so cool you pointed that out. I've told people for years. See, I have a little distillery myself. I
Hmm.
tell people, see the flakes floating around, from the char of the barrel. You see how it's not crystal clear? That's how you know it's a craftsman. So when you go into a store to buy a spirit, if you see something that's not perfect, you know it's not machine made. You know,
Yeah. I mean, I used to build the chill filtration systems that would take those particulates out because they weren't harming anything. It's just people didn't like the look of them, right? So I was involved in even part of that process for Diageo's and the big players and all that.
oh,
So
wow.
it's yeah, that's a part of it, and that's I think people are consumers are getting smarter, I think, and more educated on what products they want to patronize, if you will, and the methods that are done to make that product as well. I think they're getting more educated, it seems.
So, so you're saying caramel coloring might be going out of style?
I mean, the people I speak with, it is, but maybe some people still like it. I mean, it may look good, but you may not feel good the next morning too. That's the other component of it. So,
Yes, you want to share some of that because someone mentioned to me, and I'm not going to say names, but there were certain tequilas for years that were great. You would drink them, there wouldn't be a hangover, and then all of a sudden they became super popular. And he tells me that the taste is pretty much the same, but he's starting to experience hangovers. What's gone on in the market in the past couple of years in the tequila agave spirit market?
well, and that's where the whole additive free subject is coming in because consumers have realized that it could still say 100% agave on the bottle, but they can still add up to a certain degree of additives and modifiers in a product. And the one, there were some brands that I truly loved. I mean, that turned me on to tequila in the initial stages. But then as you do the research on the noms and how it's made and so forth, you learn some of those things about it. The information's out there. But the way someone explained it to me, and it was a really great way to think about it, like when you're tasting a tequila, there's a variation of flavor notes you can get via agave spirits and tequila, right? Way more broad than, say, whiskey. But if something tastes like cotton candy or things like that, that's when you know that's not really a natural agave flavor, if you will. So if you're tasting something, you're like, this is so good. This tastes like, this flavor candy or whatever. Well, there very well could be a possibility there's additives or something giving it that flavor that you're enjoying so much because that doesn't really tie to traditional agave spirits. And that's where some of that comes into that kind of, uneducated consumers or people that just whatever their preferences may like it on the front end, but then you're going to get hangovers and stuff because you're not dealing with just a clean spirit at that point.
So interesting. Um, and then there's also the premium. This is a question I've wanted to ask for a long time. The premium, is it truly premium when it's a clear, non-aged spirit? Is there something better to
So
it?
when you say premium, are you talking about like the crystalinos that talk about being like triple filtered or things like that, or?
No, I'm just being simple. When you walk into the store and you see a clear Bucanara or Mezcal or even a tequila that's priced at $300-400, but it's clear, it's not aged. Is that
Okay.
marketing or is there a better agave? What's going on? You're the man that knows best.
Well, I mean, I'm not here to talk about anyone else, but I think the word premium, at least to me in the space, doesn't relate that much. Like there's certain things that can be on the label, right? Like artisan distilled or ancestral, which has to do with the methods that it's used to make the spirit. So all those things have to do with how the product's made. I guess really you can say anything is premium, and anybody can put an outrageous price tag on something if they want because they're trying to portray a certain value to the market. It's a marketing play more than anything, I would say, honestly. I mean, what makes it worth $300? Honestly, what they're paying for that spirit coming out of that nom is probably the same price that someone's paying a fraction of it for. It's just that's part of the marketing platform too. And they can promote different things to justify it and so forth. Like añejos, extra añejos, I understand the pricing addition for that because it's been in a barrel so long, right? I mean, it's more investment in the process. But just to say that it's just a Blanco, but it's a premium and we're going to charge $300-400, that may be more marketing related than anything, to be honest with you. Because like I said, like I can put artisan distilled on my bottle because my rice makes it following those guidelines. If we said ancestral, it would have to be mashing the agaves by hand. It would have to follow those guidelines and document it. So those are really the people that are, I guess, the nerds or aficionados in the space like me. That's kind of what represents quality to a degree more than just calling something premium, if you will.
Look, I'm a fan actually, just from this conversation, what you just pointed out. I myself am a distiller. I said that before. Vodka premium always bothered me, and I understood that. Why would you pay 50, $60 for a bottle of vodka? It don't make sense. I'm sorry. You know, a couple dollars more, a couple dollars less. I get it, what your core ingredients is. Even with a bourbon, even with a scotch. Okay, not aged. I'm talking about, parallel years. I hear there's sometimes a markup makes sense. You're an artist, you're paying for the artist, but with of the clear spirit of tequila. When I walked into a store once, just checking out my practice stuff, and I saw for 385, completely clear. And I don't have the vast knowledge that you have. And it didn't. When you say ancestral, there's more money because it needed because you're paying for hand labor, you're paying markups and stuff. Um, Again, you're using wood to fire it to for the 3 days to break down the sugars in the pineapple. That's completely understandable why there's a markup. But if it doesn't say those, I'm with you. That's a marketing ploy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. I don't want words to be misconstrued because if it's done in that way and so much work and so much by hand, it justifies the value. It completely does, especially if the flavor is great and you love it too. But if something is made in a autoclave, which is like a, large pressure cooker, and you're keeping even a lot of the off products that you would burn off in an oven, but then yielding bigger batches and so on and so forth. All that, it's, let's say it's also 80 proof, right? So it's cut with just the same amount of water. Like for me, our Ricea is 88 proof. That's where my rice layer likes it at. We could make more profit if we watered it down to 80, but for them, it's about the flavor. Again, it's about being authentic in the process, and that's where I think value truly comes in. But yeah, if there's nothing unique and you dig into the way it's made and then it's still $300, I would question the decision on that, if you will.
No, the packaging's nice, so it makes a good
Yeah,
point.
I mean that's fine. That's fine. And but there's only, yeah, just like with vodka, I mean you're triple distilling it or whatever. I mean, how much flavor is there really? You're not sipping it neat. There's only so much you're doing to it. So what justifies a high
I
price tag? I'm
absolutely,
not sure.
I absolutely love it. Um, so I'm just curious, what's your history? People want to, I see people want to know what's your history, what's the background that brought you into this? You mentioned you work for Diageo. Share that. I mean, you're obviously a master.
I wouldn't say master by any means.
Yeah,
And
that's what the masters always say, right?
yeah, I'm still figuring things out. But so I didn't work for Diageo. So I worked for a company that was kind of like an engineering firm in essence.
Mhm.
So my client base was mainly distilleries. That's kind of what I specialized in. So I worked with Diageo facilities, Brown Forman facilities, everywhere from their stills, controls and automation, the process itself, the fermentation process, bottling, you name it. So I was involved in the manufacturing and just the core nuts and bolts of the whole process. So my background was more technical. However, it was always a goal, kind of a dream of mine to have my own brand. And, I had plans at one point to do that. And then I felt like the bourbon industry, like many other industries too, kind of started getting really filled up with a lot of brands, right? And COVID hit, and I had downtime because I couldn't even get on site to even visit my customers and work on projects and work with people. So there was abundance of free time, and I was like, what is something I'm passionate about that I can do and combine my technical skills, my career, and so forth? But I always grew up playing music. I was big into art at the time. I still make art and enjoy painting and things like that.
There
Just a lot
you
of
go.
creative. So I needed a creative outlet, long story short. And I had the downtime during COVID to figure it out. So that's how I came up with this process. I was like, well, I want to do a spirits brand, but I'm into agave spirits now. And then I was going to start with a tequila, and a gentleman that was kind of a mentor to me, because how I started, I just started reaching out to brand owners. And most people aren't going to just drop everything and help give you advice. I mean, they're trying to make their own business work, right? But that's just, I was like, well, maybe some people will talk to me and I'll get some ideas, at least financial wise, commitment wise, what it takes, all those things. But back to him, his piece of advice was, Andrew, you're not a millionaire. You're not a celebrity. So tequila is going to be really hard for you because it's already getting filled out with so many brands. And that just really hit a chord with me. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point. I mean, I felt like I could do it better than a lot of other brands via the vision for the packaging and the quality of the spirit and how I want to do those things. But those challenges were real. I mean, celebrity brands were already out there, all those things. So I was like, well, I don't want to give up on this. but how can I pivot? And that's when I was like, well, let me look at other spirit categories in Mexico that maybe people haven't heard of. Because I was at that time almost trying everything. So I started learning about Sotal and Bacanora and then Ricea. And so that's how I landed on Ricea. Long story short, it was an opportunity for me to create my own brand with a spirit that I fell in love with, but also in a space that wasn't so saturated with thousands of brands that I would just be drowned out. Because when you're a smaller guy, it's really tough, right? If you don't have all the marketing budgets and all those things, it's a tough playing field out there. And so that's how I wound up in this space in reality.
That's so cool. So once you made the decision to enter the market, you went down to Mexico. Do you actually go on a road trip?
Exactly, exactly. And that's I met a friend from California, which I didn't know her at the time. Just met her because she was like, "Hey, I know some Riceros down here. I can introduce you to some people." So fly to Puerto Vallarta to meet her. Then we just drive hours into the mountains in Muskota, which is kind of far away from everything, and just started meeting all the Riceros. I mean, I'm going to different people's farms, some at their houses. One time we had a get together. There was like 20 Riceros came together, and I got to try everybody's products to figure out who I wanted to work with and what product I wanted to use. But yeah, I mean, I think another like area brands have went wrong. If you don't go down there and really ingrain yourself in it, you don't truly understand the space. And I mean, one, that's technically your business partner, right? If they're going to produce your product, you need to really have that strong relationship. But the other thing is too, there's many brands in these smaller agave spaces that you might taste a great product and like if you had a consultant do it for you. Well, how do you know that person has the field and the infrastructure to scale? Like they may have a great Ricea or Sotal, but if they can only make 500 liters in a year, that's not even enough for one state. And then how are you going to scale? And then so now your brand has just stalled out. And those are things that until you get in the weeds of it and really start digging in, a lot of people just don't think of that, right? They just say, I want to, this is cool. I want to have an alcohol brand. But there's all those factors that you got to consider, and scaling and infrastructure is another part of it.
Very cool. Marco Alfred Cervantes, I believe, Cervantes, asks on the chat if the easiest way to explain it is like a vineyard with a heart, going out into the field and picking those pineapples.
I mean,
Just
I think the vineyard concept is a good correlation with Ricea in the sense of terroir. So when we talk about terroir with wine, like this region versus that region has a different
so
flavor
cool.
profile. So with Ricea, we do what's called wild fermentation. And that may sound strange to some people, but if you think about like mainstream tequila or even a whiskey or a bourbon, they put an exact yeast strain in those cooked agaves, let's say, and ferment that process. And that's how they control the flavor and consistency every single time. We don't do that with Ricea. So the yeast, the microbes that's in the air at Benito's Taberna on his farm, that's what's actually fermenting the agaves and imparting flavor in that. That's what we mean by wild fermentation. We're not
That's
adding a
very
specific yeast, it's just what's there. So the flavor from his farm is completely different than the flavor from someone else's farm. So that's where I think a great wine comparison comes in, is because terroir really does affect the flavor of Ricea. You can have one and another, and they can taste completely different. But yeah, it's similar concept. It's just harvesting agaves and digging them out and cutting them up is a lot of work, right? But the terroir part definitely comes into play for
I
sure.
mean, that is wild that you mentioned that. I would have never thought of that comparison, and I would have never known that they actually use wild yeast to ferment. Which you want to share the risk with using wild yeast?
Well, I mean, it's again, you have to really be a master craftsman, right? A master distiller and really know what you're doing, because otherwise I mean, you could have a batch that goes bad or inconsistent, or that's the other thing too, consistency, right? Like, how do you do that with wild fermentation, but yet every Ricea bottle that you make out of that batch tastes the same? And so it's controlled to a degree of that region, but yeah, it's harder to control, and it's just, I mean, they're watching it and they're using certain tools, but some of this is just they've done this for generations and it's been passed down for generations. They know when the agaves are ready to be distilled. They know when the fermentation process is done. They know when the agaves have the right sugar content. They can use a Brix meter, but they can just look at it and see, and it's impressive. It truly is.
It's that's very not common in the U.S. Let's just put it like that.
That's what I try telling people. And I hate to use the food analogy, but it's like processed foods versus food made from scratch. Like this is a very like
Okay.
artisan process. And it's truth. And that's why like I need to pay my Ricelero and the people in Mexico making this appropriate prices and be correct and pay them because they're putting in a ton of work with it. And that has to transfer through all the pass throughs. So no, you're not going to find a Ricea for $20 on the shelf. It's not possible. But it's also an amazing product and it's made in an artisan way and it's just a lot better for you than incredibly commercialized products too. So there's value in that. But when people say, well, why does it cost this much? Well, there's a lot that goes into it and it's produced differently than a just other commercialized product you might see.
Andrew, I said the opposite. Why is it so cheap? That's how we started off the show. That when you understand and you appreciate how it's made, you're like, how did I get it at such a good price? I think
That's
there's a
right.
big gap of knowledge in our culture here, in the alcohol space.
Definitely. And that's why I think things like this are great. I mean, Ricea education is critical just because so many people don't even know what Ricea is. I mean, so many people and they're like, well, I really like tequila, but then maybe I don't like mezcal because I think it's smoky. Well, not all mezcals are smoky also. That's kind of a stereotype. It's just like you've had very different mezcals. So people are learning there's a lot of different mezcals that have different flavor profiles too. But with Ricea, it's like, well, hey, try this. Also from a mixology standpoint, because it mixes a lot like a gin, it doesn't overpower a cocktail.
Interesting.
So mixologists are falling in love with it because they can make really any gin cocktail. So Last Word, Negroni, all these things. If you put a mezcal in that, sometimes it's hard for it to blend. It may overpower a little bit just due to those smoke notes. Whereas with Ricea, it's a lot more delicate. It's kind of on the back burner. So I drink it neat. You can sip it neat. It's wonderful. It's unique. It's just like you would sip a quality tequila neat. But however, from a mixology standpoint, it opens up other opportunities and doors there too. So it's really cool the places it can go, honestly. But education's so vital with it.
Everything's education. I'm just trying to understand this whole racia. Do you have the worm in it, or there's no
No,
worm?
no. And that was more a marketing ploy too. I mean, like some people
Spill the
did that. But
beans.
yeah, I mean, technically when I'm doing an event, I will serve it with worm salt, which is, worms are ground up in the salt, and that's part of the, kind of garnish we use. If you when we use oranges instead of limes, which you traditionally see with tequila, just because orange brings out the citrus notes in the Ricea, complements it better. And it's just a way to kind of differentiate and show, hey, this is a different spirit, guys, than tequila.
That's so interesting. I never paid attention to that, but in the salt there's worm, is ground up worms.
And worm salt, yeah. Yeah.
So interesting.
Yep.
Okay, and you rather an orange because it brings out the racia sharper.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That's is oranges net. You know, is it its home environment Mexico or only Florida?
I mean, it doesn't matter where they come from. Orange flavor is orange flavor, right? But
Okay,
it's
okay.
yeah, but it's trying to showcase this is a different spirit and create its own category versus tequila is kind of what we're trying to do and establish it. And I mean, even though it's, let's say 7 years it's been able to export and in the market technically, that's still so young. I mean, so new to so many people. So there's a lot of growth out there and more education of people, but it's got a lot of room to grow. It's exciting.
Very fascinating. What are you seeing as a struggle in the space other than education? It seems like it's a great taste profile. Uh,
Yeah, I think when you have a product that requires educating consumers, the other challenge you have is with distribution. So it can be an
oh,
amazing product,
questions too.
but distributors are like, well, that's a lot of work for my reps. They can go sell thousands of bottles of Jack Daniels. Everybody knows what it is. It's easy. Okay, this, they have to explain it to their accounts. It's more work on their part. It's one SKU, so on and so forth. So it's really the distribution becomes a challenge. There's boutique distributors out there. That's normally what I mesh with. I think it fits in that space better. Eventually, some of the big players may want to get into it, but it's just that's another challenge, right? Is distributors want to move volume, and an artisan spirit that requires education is harder on a rep to sell than something that's incredibly well known via the brand name already that they can get the volume numbers through. So there's a multitude of challenges, but that's just another one I'll throw out there.
Got it. Marco wants to know. He's back at it. We're loving it. He wants to know, have you ever seen agave with a worm in the bottle, or is it reserved for mezcal marketing?
Like another agave spirit, like a tequila or a raicilla with a worm in it. Is that
Yeah.
what? I haven't personally. I haven't. But really, I mean, I don't see any of the mezcals down there either. I mean, it's mainly one brand. I forget the name of it that kind of did that as part of their marketing. But it's
Here,
yeah,
it's right here in this conversation. Gotta get
yeah.
one of
No,
those for you.
people always think about that, and I mean, I'll buy that brand and I'll eat the worm. I mean, I don't mind it. But yeah, it's never been a part of the Raicilla heritage. We can say that. So.
What are we gonna put in? We gotta start one right now. Maybe it's a spider. Symbolism of being caught in a web.
Oh, that's
Well,
funny. That's funny.
oh my. Okay, so we got our answer on that. Its education is always the most difficult, and explain why it's harder when in the spirit industry to educate over any other industry. Or I know New Jersey why we got the ABCs, but and liquor shops can't have you. But let's hear what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of it, right? So we are in an industry with a lot of legalities and regulations, and they vary by state. I'm in Alabama. This is a control state. Everything has to be sold through the ABC here. That has its own scenario and challenges in itself. But every state has different regulations. Those are all complicated. It's also just as a brand owner, it's the cost affiliated with it. I mean, if you think about it, it's just you have to really work hard and invest in educating people. And how do you invest your time and your
Right.
marketing dollars? Because do you do events in areas that you don't have distribution yet, but they're big agave markets? Well, now you're spending a lot of money to do this event, but the people might love your product, but they can't buy it on the
Can't
shelf.
buy it.
Okay, so
You
does
got it.
that make sense financially? But then you've got to get out there and network and push it. Or do you just try to go via social channels? Well, that's fine, but that doesn't always convert to actual customers and really connecting with the brand. I mean, it's just yeah, there's a multitude of factors that can make it challenging, and it's how do you tackle that?
I had my own experience in New Jersey. They mandate if you're in a liquor shop, you
Hmm.
have to file like documentation to have a taster there in the state, which means I don't even know if it could be me. I don't recall. I believe it couldn't even be me. It had to be. You have to pay someone to go, and like your point was, what's your return on investment? You're paying a guy. He's going to charge you. For me, it's a labor of love. It's a passion. So, and I'm sure, like we're hearing from you, it's the same for you. So you go into a shop, you promote the product, you're building, fan base. But when you hire a third party, it just goes like this, and
That's right. And,
it's
and
building.
in a lot of control states, you can't be the one doing the tasting. You do have to
There
pay
you go.
someone to do that. And sometimes there's catalogs you have to pay to be in and all those things. And so you have to weigh that with, well, how much sales potential do I have versus what these costs are? And that's why the challenge is some people, celebrity, whatever, some of these brands that just roll out the gate with millions, well, they can just take tons of losses and do those things and try to figure out how it works. Well, when you're a smaller brand, you have to be more strategic. You can't just throw money away. Eventually, you're going to dry up and there's not going to be any. And that's how so many brands fold up because there's so many unforeseen challenges, right? There's so many things that come up that you just didn't think about. And I think the marketing and the education part is an ongoing piece that requires a lot of cost that most people don't put that in their business model projections when they're trying to estimate costs to start up. They don't see that part of it.
Wow. And another element, I mean, what you just said is fascinating because it's true. Everyone's like, I got the best Racia, I got the best tequila. It's gonna go off the shelves. You don't realize there's 300 tequilas. You have the best one, but go try to find a girl in a crowd. It's difficult. There's a crowd here. It's not gonna happen. You gotta shout. You gotta scream. And it's made more difficult, at least in New Jersey. Again, the store's got to pay cash up front for your product, or within 14 days. Do you have that down by you in Alabama? Because this,
So like in Alabama, I'm not sure the payment terms, but it's you can't sell single bottles. It has to be sold in 6-pack cases.
Right.
Well, like in Tennessee, distributors can sell single bottles. So that makes it easier for especially like cocktail bars. Okay, well, we want to try the product out. We'll see, but we're not committing to a 6-pack case. Well, like here, if anyone's going to support it, they've got to commit to that. Well, that's a pretty big commitment for them, right? Because Racia is not cheap. So, that's another thing too. Some states you can sell by the bottle, the distributor can, and some they have to sell 6-pack cases. And that, yeah, just like the payment terms, all that affects what threshold accounts have for investing in your brand too, right? Is all those factors.
I mean, exactly what you're saying. All these things play because if a store has to pay like in New Jersey, they're not allowed to have it in consignment. You can say goodbye because until there's someone that walks into into their store and asks for your product, they're not going to tie up the cash. It's not happening, and you can't blame the store owner if they can put something else that's going to sell. So
That's
it's
right.
like
I mean, they have a business to run too, and it's tricky because you want them to help you and be a part of what you're trying to do because you're passionate and you believe in it, but they have a business to run as well. It's just like Ricea with bars. I mean, there's not many that can find a Ricea they can put in cocktails because they have certain margins they have to do on their drinks, right? And as you get in bigger states and like in New York, they can have very expensive cocktails, but like here in the Southeast, in many places, they're like, we can't charge that much for a cocktail to make this work. So that's another challenge too. Do you want to just be a back shelf item in a bar, or do you want to be able to get in cocktails? If you want to get in cocktails, you've got to be priced a certain way, or else they just can't make sense for their business. So there's all those factors too that just, again, people think having an alcohol brand is this big fun party, but it's like you got to think about all those things. There's a lot to it.
no question. What? Just fill us in. What states are you in? Where can you be found? We're getting interest. We got one guy for sure very interested on the chat, so he's been here the whole time. Thank you, Marco.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So right now, just in the Southeast, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, technically Florida, working to branch out into bigger markets. Instagram is at Drink Elviaje, and that's ELVIAJE. The website is lviajespirits.com. But the next, I think, at least way to access the product that I'm looking to pursue is probably going the direct to consumer, e-com route and having a shop on my website and people can ship via that way. And doing that with some of the partners I'm looking at, it'll ship to roughly 40 something states. So just about the majority of the country. And I think for me, that's the next step for at least LVIA because I get messages from people from Washington, D.C. or California or all these different places like, hey, why can't we get a bottle? Well, instead of doing that slow organic growth, trying to find traditional distribution, which is challenging, especially if you're not going to commit a certain amount of capital or have third party sales in the markets and all that. It's, well, hey, here it is on the website. You guys can order it. Order it from California. You can ship a bottle out there. And so that's where I think my next step is. So in the Southeast currently with traditional distribution, and then at least for people to be able to get a bottle, going the e-com route here in the near future. And by the end of 26, have that rolling as well.
No question. I mean, my software, t2bmath.com, that's what we do, the direct to consumer market.
Yep.
It's an exploding industry. It's tricky because every state has its own story. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
People don't realize that. For example, one state can allow you to ship a bottle if you're not selling in that state yet. But once you have your product registered in that state, you can't ship to that state. So it's like I don't
They're
want to sell
protecting their, stores and so forth and don't
direct
want
controlled
that.
states.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But my thing is if people want the product and if traditional distribution is not hopping on board, then I've got to get the product out there somehow. And that's my viewpoint. And also it's a metric that's really being used now too. Hey, what are your D2C numbers? How are you succeeding in that? And it
100%.
gives you data as well. Like, okay, this is people in Colorado love this ricea. Okay, now I need to look at really ingraining there and getting in the market and getting distribution there. It's a useful tool, and I think it's the future of the space really. But I did it traditional method for the first couple of years being out in the market. And now that's I think the next step for me.
Okay, great. Andrew, it's great that we had you on. Look forward to many more. I mean, you're literally the king of the Russia market.
Well, thank you.
Can I say, is there anyone else out there?
I mean, there's definitely brands out there. Yeah, yeah. I mean, how many of us in the space? I couldn't say for sure. Maybe 40 to 50 now. It was around 30 brands when I started, but still, I mean, if you compare that to 600
No.
mezcal brands, 3,000
Right.
tequila brands, I mean, it's super small. But yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Definitely
Thank you,
enjoyed it.
Andrew.
And yeah.